Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Now I knew this would be bulky and heavy and maybe very official looking, but I had no idea it would show up looking like a dang MRE. What we have here might just be the coolest all-around kit we've ever got the chance to test. We bought a standard issue US Army Robo Impact, the impact wrench servicemen and women might use to perform repairs and maintenance on Army equipment and vehicles, including M1 Abrams tanks. And it's got some of the more curious attachments and bits these eyes have ever seen that, frankly, I have no idea what this is for, like square drive into female and male spline. So today we're going to try and get this impact to run on wall juice to measure its torque capability, since it's very much expecting something else with the connector looking like this. Compare that to corded and cordless impacts from days past to today that you might own at home as well to see how it stacks up against those, and convert it over to cordless to run off of the spiciest cordless packs we have just to see what it can do. Then briefly take it apart to peek inside and finally test some of the very different and very cool attachments that comes with this that we found pretty fascinating. And once we're done with it here, we're going to ship this full kit to a randomly chosen one of you guys that own our rank charts within this next month as a thank you, simply because we think this is something that's really cool to own. So yeah, we bought this US Army Robo Impact made by Aircraft Dynamics, a specialty tool maker out of Ohio for more than 50 years, thanks to a viewer by the name of Jesse who pointed out it being used in a clip by the 2nd Armored Brigade combat team while servicing an M1A2 Abrams, replacing parts of its tracks. Is it the most powerful thing in the world? Who's to say? I guess we'll take a look, but seems to get the job done here, using it almost like a spring compressor to line up those tank tracks. And tanks, many like these, are pretty crazy, their suspension being basically long torsion arm bars that flex up and down rather than springs, something they oddly share in common with F1 cars, which also use very shrunken down versions of the same principle for different reasons, but I imagine you at times need some serious power tools to service hardware of that size. Or when that doesn't work, you need a backup plan with some more sauce, which this kit also affords, and we'll be taking a look at that. The first step in, well, steps 1 through 10 to testing this tool is figuring out how to power it. This comes with a standard issue NATO plug receptacle, 24 DC, and up to 500 amps. So yeah, basically you could power a generator with this plug, but it's just powering this handheld impact wrench. Now this is made for a 1 1/4 inch male NATO port on a Humvee, but we don't have one of those Humvees, so we bought a few things. One, this adjustable voltage and current AC/DC inverter to be able to supply a custom level of power from the wall to this tool. Wired this up with 3 10-gauge leads from both positive and negative to encourage the least amount of resistance and most oomph we can deliver. This is currently dialed into about 24.1, 24.2 volts, which we imagine the tool should welcome. Then we ordered this NATO spec generator plug. All of this stuff is ridiculously heavy for what it is, which is basically a way to have large leads come out of our inverter to this receptacle. Just a whole lot of anodized aluminum, steel, and rubber on each of these things that feel like mini barbells. Then lastly, a NATO generator plug adapter to take this big center pin ring style and convert it over to the 2-pin generator plug, and we should still be getting, 24.03 volts, I'll take it. And that all slides together like 2 5-gallon buckets might, and from there we dial in the amount of current it likes and just keep turning things up until peak amps don't seem to be increasing, and we get max RPM from this tool, which is advertised 1800, and it's measuring 1800 RPM too. Looking good. So let's see how she does. This is called a max torque test, 10 seconds in reverse. Time to plug this whole oversized and now over complex assembly all together and see how she gets on. "252 foot-pounds. Well, she's smooth, but that's not going to set too many records ablaze. We had a feeling this might happen though. Jesse told us these are more than likely a result of nearly Cold War era ages of contracts that once secured, they're just made. And those are going to be made all at once, then in storage for forever, or continued production but with little to no updates unless for durability reasons. But for comparison, here's a Japanese-made Ingersoll Rand corded impact from the early 90s that we tested and didn't think did all that bad for the era. In this here, we see the Army impact able to top it in this reverse direction. So there is some potential there. Often what we do around here when something is plugged into the wall and we want to see numbers that are more fun is convert it to battery powered. I'd say cordless here, but there's still going to be plenty of those cords. You see, modern tools can sometimes actually get more watts total out of battery packs than we get from our silly 120 volt here in the States. This 10 amp stacked lithium flex volt, for instance, says 2,520 watts on the side of it, yet we're usually limited to about 1,800 from the wall. Since this is already 24 volt, all this took was like an adapter to make it male prong, then crimping together some leads, and presto changeo. Since this tool's already DC, this is basically ready to go. So let's see how it works. We're going to just head over into our longest reverse test, best case scenario. So it's a longer test, but we'll put the previous run on screen as well. (319 foot-pounds), and not really an improvement either. The 10 gauge leads weren't really getting hot either. It's just not a current limitation here, it seems. So makes sense that a 24 volt battery making a similar 24 volts as the inverter, they also test out the same and make roughly the same RPM, which I think tracks. But this got us thinking, and it might be some good news. If it's already being supplied with enough watts from this thing, what if we turn up the voltage? Voltage is often tied more directly with RPM, and impacts make more torque with more hammer speed, so RPM. So we tried 25 volts with nearly no change, but when you think about it, a Humvee's 24 volt NATO receptacle is really just going to be two 12 volt batteries run in series, and while a running car's battery is more like 14 volts due to the alternator. What if we just doubled that to 28 volts, like the Humvee isn't just parked but also running? And it's soaking up just as many amps as before but at a higher voltage, and it sounds pretty happy too. This one's now seeing 2,500 RPM now. This is at 28.4 volts up against the Japanese Ingersoll Rand corded again. 601 foot-pounds. Yeah, that's more than a little bit of a gain there. Pretty happy with that. It does sound like a different animal at higher voltage. Army folks, if the bolt is stuck, make sure that hammer is running, which I'm sure they could have told us. No doubt equipment like this is designed to take a whole lot of abuse and bad decision making, so we also tried turning this up to 29.5 to 30 volts with no real gains over that 28 volt run. In fact, more often than not, it would result in lower peak figures. So that does seem to be the sweet spot, 28 to 28.5 volts, which means, yes, a modern corded impact wrench, which some of the top spec in that category actually originates from Harbor Freight. And well, of course, cordless high torques these days, they both can still top this Army unit. But it was much closer than we expected. Military grade, of course, doesn't always mean cutting edge tech, just more often very customized to a certain application and for use by, well, all skill levels, let's say. Which brings us to the rest of this sometimes head-scratching kit. We'll take the impact apart coming up, but we wanted to definitely take a look at this torque multiplier included with it. We've recently tested multipliers and found them pretty fun, even if at times maybe a bit sketchy. They take your hand tool input and multiply it out by using a planetary gear set, sometimes a multi-stage one. This 4:1 input to output ratio as we measure it multiplier is unique in a few ways though. For one, it's mostly CNC machined in the head, which is not often the case on the ones we've bought, no doubt helping to justify the many thousands of dollars it originally cost. It's also a sort of male-female spline or groove slotted design on the casing and the inner housing. Very strange and almost resembles the odd-looking sockets, bit sockets and extensions that come with the kit that also feature a strange male-female spline pair all stuck together. And finally, the reaction arm on this multiplier, what the tool braces off of to apply that torque, has quick release locks and can flip around in either direction based on where you need to brace off of. It's very cool, means you can also put a long pole extension on the arm if more convenient to work on, like one of these. Let's see what it can do and also maybe figure out what its torque ratio input to output is. With the arm chained up for bracing, a 1/2-inch torque wrench brings this to about 150, and then the tool clicks, not the wrench. Even with the hand ratchet, it clicks over like a breakaway torque wrench and just stops turning the socket and continues to click and click away without any progress. It's not a ratcheting design multiplier, it's not anti-backdrag, it's just not progressing any further. Our first thought was that coming with an impact wrench, they somehow designed a mechanism that torque multiplies an impact wrench, and this thing was designed to work with an impact wrench, but no luck there. Frankly, I put this tool away and left it overnight to think about it. Then it occurred to me, we're thinking about this all wrong. These aren't tools that they're trying to sell to a consumer, advertising the highest numbers, trying to get you to buy one over the other. These are made for a purpose, and that purpose is probably, more than anything else, to not accomplish anything stupid. Perform the job, yes, like this impact wrench, but also just spec'd out to be able to do that job and, well, not perform an M kill on your own equipment by making it immobile from some new recruit going ham tightening some nuts and bolts and stripping them out. With that in mind, while it's not as measurable to test this way, I figured let's first tighten the dyno, then try to use this multiplier in reverse. With the current nut and thread size on this Skidmore, foot-pounds of torque would be this display times 1.1, so we're looking at 705 foot-pounds here, and with a breaker bar like this one that comes in the kit, and a pole as an extension like you might use with this quick disconnect reaction arm design, we got no more clicking and 700 foot-pounds coming right off. This part here, according to the digital torque adapter on here set to 250, took about 248 foot-pounds to turn, which makes for a 2.85 to 1 torque ratio in to out, which isn't all that high for a 4 to 1 rotation tool. But this clicking, yeah, that's pretty interesting. As I'm sure you've probably figured out at this point, it's a slip clutch. Allows you to tighten to about, we're thinking 165 foot-pounds and forward, almost like a torque wrench that's more durable and can't really get out of calibration. Then when you're in the direction that you can't mess things up by over-tightening them, it's just removing stuck stuff. It does allow for full beans. And as it turns out, that's on each of these attachments that the breaker bar is meant to be used on as well. That breaker bar being Blackhawk when the line was USA Made Tools, which is mainly under their proto name now. So yeah, each one of these is like a male and female splined cup that overcomes a preload and then slips forward at a specified limit, but works locked in place in reverse almost like a ratchet pawl. Each one of these is actually the same, a cup and a 1/2-inch male square drive adapter splined into it. Then the socket or extension or attachment pinned onto that square drive, so basically each one of these is the same part and easy to replace. Though some of these attachments are made for the impact, like this universal extension with a super loose head, and you can see the pinned universal joint down in the base of the socket. Haven't seen a design like this without the usual pin retaining collar, and I believe it's missing the tension spring inside to make it less complex and less components that can fail, which I think underlines the entire thought process of a toolkit like this. Make it so you could issue it to even a gorilla and they can't harm too much, but with enough oomph, especially in the removal direction, to be able to complete the task in most cases. It's been a while since I needed to use some SAE sizes, but let's get this thing open and marvel at its, well, simplicity and strangeness compared to modern examples. The planetary ring gear in this is in the nose hammer cover, which is strange. You normally find that in the tool. It has a massive old school needle bearing out front, like an inch wide needle bearing for smooth, less bouncy, slower wearing operation, and a completely contained hammer and spring mechanism, which means this already not all that heavy and very much not large in diameter hammer is hollow with a reset spring inside of it. A simple design and one you might find on a gas engine powered railway impact, which is also very old school. And two large planetary gears up here. Besides taking off the handle, which isn't all that eventful, this is about as far apart as it goes. The hammer mechanism appears to be pressed into the shielded bearing it rides on, and this is not coming off unless there's some type of trick to these. Overall, stupid simple, but works, makes enough grunt to do the task it was commissioned for, but also won't do anything too damaging, much like the rest of this fascinating and really just fun to dive into kit. Probably going to result in more vehicles and equipment repaired than damaged, and works everywhere in the world with silly sized universal connections. No doubt there's highly qualified, technically trained people using these daily, but it appears the overall best result is designing it for a pissed off gorilla in a hurry. Simplicity, reliability, less parts. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Appreciate you guys coming along for this one. We make episodes every Friday. We're gonna ship this off to a random owner of our rank charts around 25 days from now. Click some stuff below if you want to follow along with the channel, and thanks for watching.